I just wanted to thank all of you for taking the time to just call and get to know everyone and just being supportive of this whole idea and sharing our personal, perspectives and conversations to kind of learn from each other. And I also wanted to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves to each other. Also, a special thank you, Sabriyya, for willing to moderate because that was a really big piece for me.
Tim's like still trying to find his light.
Yeah. And when you were walking
towards you guys don't know the dark skin struggle. You got that natural light skin glow. I'm out here trying to find.
There we go.
That looks good.
Hey everybody, my name is Sabriyya. I am a dancer and student living in like the OC area. I go to school for journalism right now, and yeah, I'm excited to be here and go through this conversation with you guys. And thank you, Alyssa, for even calling me for your input. And I'm glad to see the way that this has unfolded. So
my name is Dominique. I am a dancer and entrepreneur, I guess you could say. I do a lot of things. I'm an LA native, born and raised. And what else? That's it, right?
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcus Wright. I am originally from Indiana, moved to LA in 2012, I believe. Yeah, 2012. And colleagues of Tim and Alyssa, I own my own nutrition meal prep company as well. So no 2 days are alike for me. It's the hustle, it's the grind.
My name is Tim, and I am originally from the greatest country in this world, Nigeria, Africa. Yeah. Snap, hands up. Let's go. But I'm now most recently in Roseville, a little suburb of Sacramento, in the leadership residency program. Super excited to have this conversation for sure.
Sabriyya is gonna, open this up and kind of guide us through our conversations and some of the topics that I think we all had in our conversations with her include, police brutality, defunding the police budget. So take it away, Sabriyya.
I remember I spoke to one of you had been out on at the protest, so I'm just curious to know what I think it was Dom, right? You were out at our protest.
Yeah, I went to the Hollywood one yesterday. I went to both City Hall ones in Los Angeles.
And how was it? Like, what was the energy like?
The energy was really, really, really good. A lot of people showed up and showed out. And then LA, it was just crazy turnout. I don't know if you saw the footage, but oh my God, it was wild. But just taking a step back and really seeing all these people coming together for the same cause, under the same beat, it was really moving.
So what was the cause? Like what were they really calling for the most?
It was defunding the police, and then it was the whole Black Lives Matter movement.
So right now, a lot of people are calling for the LA people's budget to basically divest out of the it's $3.1 billion that the mayor has to work with, and they're calling for a completely different allocation of those funds right now. And when you guys hear that, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? Where do you think that the money is going? How much do you know about it? I'm curious, Marcus.
For me, I think it's a wise move if the funds are allocated appropriately. I mean, look at LA County, and there's roughly about 8 million people. When you talk about stripping it, the overall city, the county of resources, it makes sense in this regards, but it has to be very targeted. I support it with the right strategy behind it. And it's not just, we're going to defund the police and we're not going to give any resources to the police or use any of these funds for the police. No, there needs to be training. There needs to be cultural competencies. I mean, the whole thing needs to be laid out. Money needs to be put back in for educational purposes, for the community. I like to think that there's a finance. Sorry. All right,
That's so funny.
that's Nipsey, by the way. So
Oh,
he does what he wants.
Nice.
For me, I just want to make sure that the funds, if they're actually going to, defund the police, that it's used to for more awareness, to bring people together, to fill the gaps.
and right now, out of the 3.1 billion that I said, 53.8% of that is what the mayor has proposed to go towards police. With when you said education, about 4.6% is what he would like to go towards library. There's also 3.1% that goes directly to the city attorney, as well as let's see, there's an 8% allocated for other, there's a 16% allocated for fire, and then public works about 7%, and rec and park 6%. So with the LA's people budget, they broke it down into a kind of 4 different categories, to divest outside of the police. So 44% instead, they'd like to go towards universal aid and crisis management, and that is going to be housing support, education, emergency preparedness too, in case earthquakes or any of that. And then out of all that, they want law enforcement and policing for that to be about 5.72%. So the LA People's Budget is calling for 5% to go towards law enforcement and policing, when the mayor's budget is calling for about 60% to go towards police and the city attorney. So knowing that, how does it make you feel about where our government official, Nipsey, where our government officials, just like a ghost. How does it make you feel about, where our government officials are deciding to put funds, and then knowing that that's the pattern and where we are now? Tim, any thoughts? He's on mute.
Tim, you want to unmute?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think you just see how big of an issue it is. Who are the people that then need to move the needle? Maybe we don't get 5% this budget cycle. Maybe we get it down to 52%, right? And then you get it down to 40%, and you start getting the right people in place, and you celebrate those small wins, getting the right people in there, showing the metrics, right? So we divested 5% from this police budget. We put it into this thing, and look at the results. We now have an increased high school graduation rate in this demographic. We have a decreased heart conditions or whatever in this particular and you have to be very intentional about tracking those dollars, because that's when you can tell the story. Like, yo, we did this with 5% of the budget. Imagine what we can do with 45% of the budget.
So the LA People's Budget does have a reimagined community safety allocation for about 24%. And then that 24%, they want to see in domestic abuse, violence, and prevention. They wanted to go towards restorative justice practice, as well as some of those funds being given to victims from brutality. Reparations, basically, is what they called it, from police brutality. Minneapolis, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but their council just voted to basically disband their police department. The president, Lisa Bender, she didn't really say exactly what that plan would be, like what you guys are saying, show us receipts. Some things that are floating around is that mental health professionals will be the ones who come out to mental health distress calls. Instead of the police, you call a mental health professional. Fire and EMT responders will come out to overdose calls. So any drug-related calls, so that's what the people are saying they'd like to see. And then for traffic stops, it would be basically a traffic unit that was paying attention to that, or cameras, which some of us are familiar with. So the one thing that's in there that hasn't really been stated, though, is how how are you going to deal with violent and dangerous crimes as we defund the police and we start to reimagine community safety, as the LA People's Budget is calling for. What would you guys consider to be the right move for violent and dangerous crimes?
You know, I think that you're always going to have some type of tactical team, to be honest with you, because you need people who are skilled and trained to be able to handle those one-off situations. Where you're in the day-to-day, when you're in the beat of it, right? You know, and who knows, you may have just had an altercation with someone and half hour ago, and you're right back on the beat, you're on another call. And so that, you know, I can only imagine what that wear and tear does to the mind. But so there needs to be some type of training, internal resources, because I mean, it could be a mental health thing on the cop side as well. You know what I mean? And how are we auditing? How are we checking this stuff? And how are we ensuring that they have the right resources as well? Because they're human as well. I'm not giving giving any excuses for anyone, but there is an opportunity. Like when you look at it and you want to enhance or you want to improve the life of the civilians, well, we also have to enhance the thinking and the psychology of cops today.
Absolutely. And there is actually a petition, which Alyssa, I'll give it to you, that's going around right now to make sure that it's federally required for police to get a psychological screening for employment. So that is something that people are concerned about, you know, and it's something to really, really think about, which is the reason why people are calling for the abolition of police, or, you know, and then some people say defund police, which we'll get into in a minute, but that is a huge thing. You can, some retail management jobs, you need to have a bachelor's degree to work retail and to manage retail, but then, you know, you can have a police officer who does minimal amount of training and doesn't get psychologically tested, and they've got a gun and they've got a badge and they're able to get one quicker than I am. And cops do have a kind of legal immunity, qualified immunity, where they're able to still do their duties even if irresponsible things happen. So I'm curious to know, Tim, how you feel about what would be next steps for violent and dangerous crimes, like what you think Minneapolis, what should they do about that part of disbanding their police?
The biggest thing that folks are mad about, even beyond, you know, Black lives and the racial stuff, is just accountability. That's just the first thing, is address the lack of accountability, because a leader has to be held at a much higher standard than the regular person because of the level of influence, the level of responsibility. There are higher standards for higher levels of individuals. So I think that piece of it will have a lot more impact on whatever else that they need to do in policing and in maintaining law and order and in maintaining peace and all these different things. Because anything outside of that is just going to be like, no, you're missing the point.
How do we feel about abolition of the police in LA?
It's hard for me to answer that question without knowing what's the strategy. You know, how do we move forward in this foreign space? I'm more so on the side of let's get everyone the resources that they need to make this thing run optimal. A lot of states will get a chance to kind of see, you know, who does what first and kind of what results come from it. You know what I mean? But I just don't think we're there yet. I think that we should try to fix the problem, and I don't think getting rid of the police task force as a whole is the overall answer.
So how about defunding the police? Does defunding the police seem like the answer at this moment? We've militarized the police at this point. I mean, you know, you're seeing it everywhere. Everybody's like, you were able to get, riot gear and tear gas in time for these protests, but now all the testing kits that they needed for the pandemic, you know, our healthcare workers are in plastic bags, but there's of $3.1 billion, more than half of that is going towards the police. But does defunding the police seem like the next thing to do moving forward?
I think it's a viable option. There needs to be full transparency where this money is going, you know, how it's supposed to work, and what's the end result of what we're trying to accomplish.
So what would the right resources be?
For me, again, it goes back to education. I think also hiring practices, understanding what's the police's hiring practices. Well, think about it. If you have a police officer and just, that's primarily his route is in East Los Angeles, Skid Row, but he comes from a suburban neighborhood. Let's say he moves to LA to join the police force from South Dakota somewhere, right? He's not really familiar with the LA culture. So what are our hiring practices? You know what I mean? I think that there needs to be a concentrated effort on hiring individuals who's basically from that community. And a lot of that, it starts from the ground level. If you institute community programs that promote this kind of stuff, like when kids go to Big Brothers and after school programs, and you have this kind of education that's being provided to the community, and then also giving the police the knowledge to how to perform their job without feeling like every situation is the same situation. I feel like they look at everybody almost through a straight lens, especially when you're dealing with minorities. So I think everything starts with education.
Yeah, you mentioned a good point, looking through everybody with a straight lens, especially when dealing with minorities. And besides defunding, besides abolishing, that's really the big issue. They're killing Black and brown people at the highest rates. And I mean, Alyssa kind of talked about it earlier. She told me today, I didn't realize that the police began as like a runaway slave patrol. And even further than that, they began to make sure that natives couldn't come back on their land. You see that when we have now for-profit prisons and private prisons, it's a modern day slavery in a sense, because you have these police, like you said, who just look at these people through their lens, and they're just a quota to them. They're a quota to them because these private prisons have to fill these beds so that they can get more funds from these super PACs. So one thing to definitely look into if you're somebody watching this is 13th. Tim has made it outside, y'all. He has made it outside.
Giving us a tour, really.
He has given us a tour of
He found his lighting. He found his lighting. There it is.
Natural light.
I found my light. And I also breeze. That garage is getting
You're
hot.
gonna get these cheekbones today. I love it. I'm curious how you feel about it, Dom, because I saw when he said, these people don't even know LA. I saw you were like, yep, they don't.
I feel when you are from a community, and then you are responsible to patrol and serve and protect, I feel there's more of a connection that you feel, and you want to take care of it. I also agree with what he said about, it's the allocation of the funds, making sure that a lot more goes into tactical training methods and working on your mind rather than, just responding out of like fear. Being a leader, it's even that much more important for you to invest in your own internal self, because then that's gonna bleed outward, and by the decisions you make, you really handle it different if you're from that community that you're protecting, because there's more connectedness.
And there's also a piece where, I used to play college football, and we used to always tell the cornerback is the guy who covers the receiver. So the cornerback, the receiver could catch the ball on the cornerback, go for 70 yards and score a touchdown. The biggest thing that we always would tell the cornerback is that you have to have a short memory, meaning, get back out there and do it again, right? Kind of the same philosophy with policing. You can have an occurrence with someone earlier that day that impacts your whole entire day. But and I'm not a police officer, so I don't want to pretend like I can walk a mile into their shoes, but I would like to say that it has to get to a point where that previous arrest hasn't scarred you or made you form an opinion about every person of that caliber that you're dealing with in that regards. Yes, it makes you mindful each interaction, but it's also, you have to have short memory as well, because that's how you get rid of biases. This starts from the top down. This starts with legislation. This starts with processes. And that's why I say you have to put everything on the table and look at this stuff. It's not just black and white. This topic has so many different moving parts that the only way you can start to unfold stuff is putting everything on the table and assessing everything from the time that you're recruiting recruits all the way through their first arrest. So you got to continuously work on enhancing, changing, modifying as you go. And maybe that's where we are right now. We're at a state right now where I think everybody, it's been an enormous outcry for this. And so hopefully, we're one step closer.
Dom, you had said something about, that this is human lives that we're basically like thinking about. That's the whole point of like this Black Lives Matter movement, as well as all these subgroups, defund the police, abolish the police, apologize, whatever it is. And so I know we have two fathers on the panel. First of all, happy Father's Day. I just realized it's your month. Woo-hoo. So yeah, two Black men raising Black kings and queens. When you think of the vision of like, like the welfare of your children, where do you kind of see it?
For all my kids know right now, police are the ones that, if you're driving too fast, they pull you over and give you a ticket. Like that's their extent of policing. As they grow up and looking at the kind of the state that things are in and looking at the magnitude of change that needs to be made, I have now switched my focus to just having them be more internally focused, because what I've seen is that the folks that are focused on a skill or a talent or whatever are less likely to get in trouble because they don't have time, right? They don't have time. I have a cousin, a niece who is 17, beautiful girl, but she's a swimmer. Like her thing is swimming. She is so focused on, I need to get my times faster. I need to stay healthy. I need to, do this. I need to do that. I still need to do well in school so I can get the right scholarship to go to the right college and make it to the Olympics. Like she is so focused on that stuff. And even when she's talking about boys, it's like, if they don't match my mindset, if all they're looking for is somebody to grind on or feel up or what, like I can't even engage in a conversation with them. So like, that's the way that I've thought about it, is like focusing on what they're really good at, building the principles in the home so they know how to interact with the world, be very hyper-focused on what you're internally, but also sensitive to the world around you. But that's how I think about it.
Thank you. So we're nearing the end. I'm curious if Marcus or Dominique, if you guys have any closing remarks, anything you'd like to leave the audience with.
Throughout this whole experience, it's brought in a new awareness to how important knowledge is, and seeking credible knowledge of here, but also here, because it all starts internally. I've realized that I need to study up. You kind of get lost in the sauce of your own life, that this has brought in a new awareness to what's really going on, and it shifted the focus, and I'm really happy that it did.
We are at a critical time in history right now, and nothing happens overnight. And so if I have any last final words, it's let's keep our foot on the gas. This is generational fire. And right now, what we're doing, these massive crowds of peaceful protesting that's going on internationally, we're really on to something. Now we need constructive ideas on what we really need. And we need to start verbalizing that more than ever. And platforms like this, where we're sitting on and having these conversations, I think is great. There's different people who, who follow me, I follow, that we don't see eye to eye on this. But be able to have these conversations and be able to debate, because you never know whose heart you can change through more information. And so it can't stop. Fatigue is not an option until we start seeing the radical change that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that we all come together. Thank you, Alyssa, so much for wanting to even just do this platform. When Alyssa called me, her whole thing was that, she felt a need, like you said, of fire to like keep her foot on the gas. So again, thank you, Alyssa, for using your creativity and your platform to bring all of us together. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Dominique. Thank you, Tim, for sitting down with me and talking with me. It was so great to hear everything you guys had to say. So we're gonna go ahead and link anything that we talked about, the LA People's budget, we have the definition for qualified immunity, some petitions are in there too. We'll go ahead and link those so that you guys who are watching can go ahead and study up and do your research, just like Dom said, read. And we'll also link our guests as well so that you guys can keep up with them. So thank you again, and thank you to everybody watching.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.